Hi, Jenni here, and since the beginning of this channel I have shared books by Palestinian authors in many different videos, but also I've posted some dedicated videos of Palestinian books as well. In this video I want to focus on the most recent releases by Palestinian authors that I have read recently this year. These are not the only books on Palestine that I've read this year, but I wanted to focus on the most recent releases. And I do want to emphasize that when it comes to Palestine or any issue, reading is not enough. It is important to obviously to read and educate yourself on different issues, but then also take that knowledge and share it forward. Attend protests, help other ways, donate if you can. I've shared many different Palestinian foundations and fundraisers throughout my channel. One that you could donate to is Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. They do important work. It is important to learn more about Palestine because even as someone who has been aware of Palestine and pro-Palestine since 2014, there is always something new to learn when it comes to how insidious Israeli military and Israeli lawmakers are when it comes to Palestinians' lives. I have different types of books here. I have non-fiction, I have fiction, I have poetry, I have one pamphlet I want to discuss, so let's get into it. The first book I want to highlight is Refaat Al-Harrir, If I Must Die, Poetry and Prose. Refaat Al-Harrir was a renowned poet and a literature professor based in Gaza, and he was unfortunately killed by an Israeli airstrike in December 2023. This book was released after his death, and it has collected obviously his poems, some of his essays that were released in different publications. This book obviously made me emotional and just amazed at what an intellect Refaat Al-Harrir was. I was just so in awe of how he used literature and language as tools against oppression, and how many poets and authors he educated. And there's a lot to learn about life in Gaza in this book. This was a very valuable reading experience. Refaat Al-Harrir should still be here. I have also read The Eyes of Gaza, A Diary of Resilience by Plestia Alakad. This is Plestia's diary entries from the start of the current genocide that is going on up until her leaving Gaza in November 2023, which obviously at that point we didn't even know how long this genocide would still take place 2 years later. And then after leaving Gaza, there are some entries about her life, after surviving genocide and how conflicted she feels about surviving. She also discusses how much she wanted to be a journalist and wanted to share Gaza's story and talk about Gaza and Palestine. But at times, Plestia shared that it was difficult or conflicting to share news and report from Gaza because simultaneously people around the world were more aware of Gaza and the Palestinian struggle for freedom and were supportive of it. But at the same time, even though she reported on these horrible massacres that were committed by Israel, the international community did nothing to stop it. And some governments even supported it. She also talks about survivors' guilt. She talks about how Palestinians have to be perfect victims. This is a very personal book, obviously, since it's her diary. But I think it's a really important look into the day-to-day life of trying to survive genocide. The next book I want to talk about is Forest of Noise by the poet Mosab Abu Toha. And this is about his experience of being Palestinian living in Gaza and all of those restrictions that Israel has set on them, and then getting through this genocide. He was also kidnapped by Israeli authorities during the genocide, but he was thankfully released. These poems are deeply moving and deeply touching, and as someone who loves to write poems myself, I feel such an inspiration from how incredibly written these are. If I remember correctly, and I think I this is a fact, he was also a student of Refat Alarir, so that also shows the impact of Refat Alarir in Gaza literary circles. I love that these poems are quite free form, meaning that some of the poems are just few words here and there. Some of them are just like thoughts of his consciousness and deeply impactful, and I absolutely loved this poetry collection. Then I read Perfect Victims and the Politics of Appeal by Mohammed El-Kurd, who is a Palestinian poet and writer. Previously, he has released a poetry collection, Rifka, which is also amazing. And this is an essay collection on this topic of how Palestinians have to be perfect victims in order to get some kind of accurate reporting on their lives. And even then, it's only in like special cases. Some of these essays were previously released on different platforms, but all of them discuss this topic of how Palestinians do not deserve a genocide. Palestinians do not deserve apartheid. Palestinians do not deserve occupation in any circumstance. But people still argue that maybe there are justifications for everything that Palestinians have to go through by the state of Israel and other colonialist powers. And I think this page, even if, summarizes the point of the book really perfectly. El-Kurd argues about how Palestinian men are often disregarded when it comes to Palestine, especially during this genocide. That Palestinian men are always instantly viewed as someone deserving of violence, which is obviously not true, but the media has made it so in their messaging. I think this is very eloquently written, and he argues his points really, really well. I think he worded a lot of things that I've been already thinking about and did it so very eloquently. He's also very funny. Overall, this is an excellent book, and it's definitely in the running for me to be the best nonfiction read of the year. So, for example, there's an essay called Shireen's Passport on the invention of the civilian. Oftentimes when Palestinians are killed by Israel, the news often highlight if they are an American citizen or a citizen of another country to kind of humanize them more, because the media has made it so that just a Palestinian being killed is just the normal. Tropes and drones on discursive landmines. It's about online conversations and, discourse everywhere about how Palestinians are literally being genocided by Israel. But if someone says something that is maybe viewed problematic, that becomes the conversation, as opposed to the literal genocide going on. So I think Mohammed El-Kurd discusses all of these things and answers so many questions incredibly well in this book. Then I read a short book. I think the term they used for it was a pamphlet, called Resisting Erasure, Capital, Imperialism and Race in Palestine by Adam Hanier, Rob Knox and Rafiv Ziadah. And this is a study on how racism and capitalism makes the oppression of Palestinians and the apartheid state and the occupation reinforced by Israel even worse. It discusses just how much Israel impacts Palestinian economy and how Palestinian workers and companies and economy overall cannot exist without being dependent on Israel, because Israel has made it so. I think it was very well structured analysis and arguments on the topic of capitalism, and also it takes a look into the normalization of Israel, especially with Arab nations, and how that further oppresses Palestinians. I think my main takeaway from the pamphlet is that we cannot have freedom from capitalism without freedom of Palestine. As someone whose strongest suit is not economics, this book was a bit of a challenge to read because the vocabulary of economy doesn't come naturally to me, so it took me quite a while to read this, but I feel like it discussed a very important aspect of Palestinian freedom and just how much anti-Palestinian racism impacts the lives of Palestinians and the economy of Palestine overall. Alright, the last book is a fiction And it's a Finnish book, and it's one of the best books I read this year, probably my favorite Finnish book of the year. It's Isäni appelsiinin kukkien maasta by Irene Sidan. Irene Sidan is a former journalist. She comes from a Finnish Palestinian background. Her father is from Palestine, her mother is Finnish, and she grew up in Finland. The main character, Amira, is a Finnish Palestinian journalist, but the author has said that we shouldn't view the character as a reflection of her, the author. This book starts in October 2023, but many of the chapters are flashbacks to past of Amira traveling to Palestine and of different experiences Amira has had when it comes to her Palestinian heritage in Finland, and how her relationship with her father, their father-daughter relationship, is impacted with the fact that Amira doesn't speak Arabic and they live in a very different cultural environments. And then also Amira thinks about like what even is culture, and it's a very beautiful, human and eloquent look into being of diaspora Palestinian, being Finnish Palestinian, and then connecting to one side of your heritage more. And it also looks into the job of a journalist, of what it's like to report on the genocide in Gaza, and how much there is feedback from readers who are not happy with your reporting, and how deeply colonialism impacts your well-being. Oh my god, this book discusses so much, and I don't feel like that was a fair summary. But I feel like the red string throughout is the father-daughter relationship, trying to communicate the best they can, the issues of non-communication they have, and trying to connect together and trying to understand each other's anger and other emotions. And oh my god, this book is so excellent, and I feel so bad that non-Finnish people cannot read this since it's not translated. I love this book so much that I went in and bought the hardcover after I got the paperback for free through this customer program at my local bookstore. I was just so completely amazed by it. The writing is very accessible, even though the topics at hand are very, very heavy. You don't feel drained while reading it. Yeah, I just wish people internationally could read this book. And I think because the author and the characters are Finnish Palestinian, that adds such an interesting and important layer to this conversation as well. I was truly amazed and just in awe of this book. Alright, so those are some of the books by Palestinian authors that I've read this year. I hope you check out some of these books after listening to this video. I hope I did them justice. Overall, I think all of these were really incredible and educated me so much more on the experiences of Palestinians and everything that they've gone through. I will try my best to use the knowledge I've gained to communicate to further about Palestinian liberation. I hope you enjoyed this video. Free Palestine. See you in the next one. Bye!